Okay, this video is going to be about Android permissions within Cordova applications. Now, there's different kinds of permissions that are required when you're building an application for Android. Some of the stuff that I'm going to do in here is going to pertain to iOS and Android, but this video is specifically about the Android permissions, because back in version 6 with Android Marshmallow, the way permissions were allotted was changed. And there's been a few changes since then as well, but in general, the process divided the permissions up into a couple of different categories, and some of the permissions will be issued at install time. Some of the permissions are at runtime, so the user gets the prompt and has to say yes or no whether or not they're going to allow access to something. Those ones tend to be things like, hey, you want to access my contacts, you want to access my camera roll, you want to access geolocation to know where I am. Anything that's sort of personal information, those ones are considered dangerous permissions. And actually, if we take a look, there's a on the Android developer site, I'm going to leave links to these inside the description for you, but on the Android developer site, there is the manifest permissions page here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. And this is a list of all the different permissions that exist inside of Android. So these are all things that you can set inside of your application to say, hey, yeah, I need to be able to do this. I need to be able to send an SMS message. I need to access the phone. I need to change the wallpaper. I need to access Bluetooth. There's tons and tons and tons of these permissions. And as you build plugins for Cordova or install plugins, you need these various permissions. Now, the categories for the permissions, here's the permission page. Again, I will leave a link for this. The different types of permissions that we are going to have, there's the dangerous permissions. These are the ones that the user has to agree to. So there's that one category of permissions. So dangerous are the ones that you have to ask the person if you're allowed to do it. Normal permissions are things that at install time you say that you want to be able to do this. So this is a list for the regular ones, the normal permissions. And you can see things like Bluetooth are inside of here. Internet. All Cordova applications have the internet one. So because it's a browser, basically, that's what the application is. It has to have the internet permission. So that's going to be built into any Cordova app that you build. Signature permissions. This has to do more with third-party applications. So let's say that I build a plugin that uses a signature permission. Somebody else won't be able to take that, install it as part of their application, and have permission to do that. They're going to have to add the permission themselves to be able to do that. So that's signature permissions. And then the dangerous ones, as I said before, those are the ones where you are getting the user to agree to do it. Special permissions, there's a handful of those. Okay. So the manifest is the list of everything. Special permissions page. Special permissions page, the different types. I will provide both those links to you. The config.xml documentation from Cordova. This is very helpful as well. There's two different tags that we can put inside of our config.xml file. Edit config and config file. These two are going to be used for permissions. Edit config means I want to edit something that's already in the settings file. For Android, this is the Android.manifest file. If we look in the project here, here's my Android manifest file right now. This is the XML file that's used by an Android project to define what it's allowed to do, what hardware can it access, some basic settings about the hardware and colors, and permissions. Like I was saying, Android permission internet, all Cordova apps have that by default in this file. In the config file, if we add in one of these tags, the edit config file, it means I want to change something inside the Android manifest file. If I add a config file, it means I want to add something new into that file. So that's what we're going to do for our permissions. And if we come down here, you can see that inside my platform Android area, we can add preferences in there. But what we're really looking to do here is add this chunk. So this config file, we're going to say where in the file, so after what other element. There is already a uses permissions element inside that file. That's this one right here. So I'm saying after that one, this is where I'm going to insert the other stuff, the new stuff. Parent. So this is an XPath. This describes where in the file. Manifest is the root tag. So inside the manifest tag, after this, inside this file, I want to add all of this. This is what I'm going to stick inside of that file to get all these things. Now, Bluetooth and Bluetooth admin, those are normal permissions. All I have to do is put those in the Android manifest file, and I get those permissions. The other stuff that I've got here, I'm going to use the Android permission plugin that's going to let me set or request or figure out if I have permissions to do things. These will prompt the user to let me have access to those things. Okay, so we've got these things being added to the Android manifest file. If I run my Cordova build Android command, what's going to happen is this config file setting is going to be read. These things should be inserted, there we go, into the Android manifest files. There was the internet one. These ones all got added. Now, with those there, Bluetooth, Bluetooth admin, those are the normal ones. Those ones are fine now. These other ones, they're in here. My app knows about the permissions. So now I'm allowed to prompt the user to say, hey, do you want to do this? Now, most of the time when you add a plugin to a Cordova application, you don't necessarily have to do this part because the plugin is going to do this part for you. The plugin, a camera plugin, well, it's already going to ask for the permission to use the camera. So we don't have to do this. This is in cases where you're using another plugin, which maybe it's got part of the permissions, but it doesn't have all the permissions around something that you want to do. Like here, if you're doing stuff with geolocation, there's actually 3 different permissions: course location, find location, and background location. So running in the background to find the location. These are 3 different things. Maybe you've got course location, but you don't have the others. So we can use the Cordova permission plugin, the Android permission plugin, to add the other ones. Maybe you're trying to use a plugin like the media capture plugin is a good example. The media capture plugin will let you save things. So you record a video, you record an audio, and then the plugin will save it, but you might not have read access to the location where you've actually saved it. So you might want to add the permission to do that. Okay, so there's the config. Oh, one last thing about this config. You'll notice here that I'm saying Android:name for all these values. This is a namespace, and we have to include this in our file. So up at the top, way over here, there it is. XML namespace Android. This part right here, I had to add that last piece into this file to make this work as well. So with that, and with my config file, with all this set up, that's going to work. I'll leave a copy of this file for you as well so you can look at how that was set up. Now I have installed the Cordova plugin Android permissions. Here's the URL for it. This is in my JavaScript file. I will leave you a copy of this and the config file and the links to those pages that I was showing you. The Cordova plugin for Android permissions. This is the only plugin I've actually added to my project other than the default Cordova project. These are the links right here that we were just looking at. In my application, I'm waiting for device ready. Once I've got that, then I'm going to get my Cordova plugins permissions. This is my object. This is the object you get from that plugin. This one is going to have a few methods. Now, my application, what I'm doing here is I've got 4 buttons, and I'm going to ask for all the camera permissions, all the geolocation permissions, all the contact permissions, and the Bluetooth permissions when I click on these buttons. So each one of these buttons calls a different function inside my code here. For the geolocation one, I'm creating an array here. These are the permissions. Those are the 3 permissions related to geolocation. I'm going to call app permissions get check permission. This is how you can test to see whether or not you currently have it. Now I can only put one at a time, so I just picked course location to see if I had that. There's that permission, and the method check permission has a name for the permission and then a success and a failure callback. The first one, the first function, this is my object that gets passed in here to tell me whether or not it worked. So that's my success callback, and then there is also an error callback. So I check, and it's going to tell me my status object that's passed into this function has a Boolean property here called has permission. That'll be yes or no. Do you currently have the permission? Yes? Okay, you're good to go. If not, so if I get a false back for that, I'm going to request permission. Now there's two methods, request permission, singular, and request permissions. Permissions takes an array, just like I've defined here. So I can pass an array, or I can pass in a single string if I call request permission, singular. So I've got one for check permission for one of the geolocation permissions. Then I'm going to try to get all of those ones. Next, same thing with Bluetooth. I'm going to check to see if I have the Bluetooth. Now I should, because it's in the Android manifest, I should already have this. This should come back as true. If not, I'm going to request the permission. This shouldn't be required because it's a normal permission, not a dangerous one. Contacts, read and write contacts. Going to repeat the same thing. I'm going to request both of those things if I don't have them. And then the camera permissions. There we go. I'm going to request the camera permission, and there's only one that I need, so it's just the singular request permission. All right, so I'm going to start this up. I'm going to do Cordova run Android on my device. Now I do have a device. Just going to make sure that it is connected here. There we go. So compile that. I come over here. This is my phone, and there we are. It's launched. Okay, so here's my feedback. This is the permissions object the plugin gives me, and it has inside of it a list. There's a whole bunch of constants, a whole bunch of properties that look like constants, but they are the strings, the values for all the possible permissions. And then inside the prototype, we have those four methods: check permission, request permissions, plural. This has permission. This is an old version. This is going to be deprecated at some point. Check permission is the one that you want to use. These two they do the same thing, but has permission is going to be dropped. Okay, so I've got my four buttons here, and if I click on the Bluetooth, there it is. Has Bluetooth is true. Okay, great. I did have that permission. Contacts. Yep, there we go. Geolocation, camera. Now these are all true because I had installed and run this application on my phone a few minutes ago, and when I did, I accepted all those permissions. So let me just see if I can uninstall the whole thing. Last time I tried to uninstall the whole application, what happened was it cached the permissions, so I had to restart my device. And what I'll do is I will, through the magic of editing, not make you wait through the restart. So I've uninstalled it. Now I'm going to restart my device, and I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so I've restarted my phone. I've just finished reinstalling the application again, so hopefully all those permissions will be cleared out this time. And here we go. Bluetooth, yes, that works. Contacts. Okay, now you can't see it on the screen here, but it is prompting me. Here you can see that it is false, and I've got the prompt on there, allow perm to access your contacts. I will say yes. If I click contacts again, oh, my app crashes. And I'll restart it. There we go. So contacts, there it is. So contacts is now true. I didn't have to prompt it the second time. Bluetooth. So Bluetooth is true. And geolocation, false, but I'm being prompted now to allow. And that worked. And camera, and I'm being prompted to do that. And there we have it. Okay, so this plugin allows me to prompt the user to ask for permission to do things, but for that to work properly, I do need to put those dangerous permissions into the AndroidManifest.xml file, this one right here. And we do that through the config file by adding config with the user's permission, and don't forget the namespace to use for this Android name property. All right, so I will provide those links that are in the JavaScript file. I'll put them in the description. I will leave copies of the index.js, the config.xml file as links to code gists on GitHub. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. And as always, thanks for watching.